Okay, good morning everyone. Today we'll be talking about the social pyramid, which is not the same as the building. Yeah? So this is the building, as you can see, the gebouw. Yeah? But the social pyramid is about something else. It's about who was rich and who was poor in ancient Egypt. Yeah? Wie was rijk and wie was arm, right? Okay, this is what it looks like actually. Yeah. So this is what the social pyramid looks like. Let's see if I can use a pen. At the top of the social pyramid, you would find the pharaoh. Yeah, he was very rich, and there's only one place at the top of the pyramid, and that's especially for the pharaoh, right? At the bottom, then you would find the poorer people. Yeah, the slaves, for example. Yeah. So as you can see, very poor people at the bottom, very rich people at the top of the pyramid. Yeah. This is actually the version that we use here in Flanders, because it's a little bit better, because you can see these lines. Yeah. And this means that you can't go from one part of the pyramid to the other part of the pyramid. I'll explain in a minute what this means. Okay, so here we find the pharaoh again. Yes. Next, we'll find the vizier. Remember what the vizier is? Kind of prime minister. Yeah. Okay. Underneath the vizier, you'll find all the people that help the pharaoh. Remember the word elite? Elite. Yeah. Those people live at the top of the pyramids. We think about civil servants. Ambachtslui. Mijn dochter is aan het printen, dat is eigenlijk zeer vervelend. The visor. I think that should be the vizier, the visors. Apparently they use the word visor and vizier together. Priests and nobility. Yeah? So priests and the priesters, nobility, adel. Right? So very high people. Think of generals from the army. Generals, generaals. Yeah? So very high people. And what's very special, when you're a girl in this class, you're lucky of course, because you're born rich. When you're a girl in this class, you need to marry someone from this class. So if you fall in love with someone from the middle class, from this class, I'm sorry, it can't happen. Yeah. So you need to marry someone from the upper class. Right. Okay, then we've got the middle class, right? Who do we have here? We've got traders, handelaars. Remember that the traders, they work for the pharaoh. So for us traders, they work for themselves. But in Egypt, they would work for the pharaoh. That's a very important thing. So when they go somewhere, it's the pharaoh that tells them, you go there and you buy this for me. Yeah. Next, we've got scribes. Also often called writers. Why doesn't this? Yeah. Scribes or writers, it's the same word. Not a lot of people could write in Egypt. Yeah? Actually, only very, very few people. So this meant that you were kind of rich, that you would kind of have a very good social status. Heel goede sociale status. Right. And then of course at the bottom of the middle class, we had the farmers. The farmers' lives was very hard. They had to wake up in the morning really early. Actually, when the sun came up, they would get out of their bed. I don't know if you get early in the morning, if you get up early in the morning, but they certainly had to. And then they had to work all day, and then in the evening, quite late, they could stop working. And the sad thing is that they can't keep the grain. Remember? So they're farmers, they're growing grain. They can't keep it. They need to give it to the pharaoh. So that's pretty sad, if you ask me. In the middle, we've got craftsmen. Yeah, craftsmen, ambachtslui. So people that build tables, people that make swords, zwaarden, and so on. Yes. So people that work with their hands. You need to have those too, of course. People need to be built. And then of course you have the lowest soldiers, not the generals, but just the fighters. You also find them here in this lower middle class. Actually, the life of the farmers is not very much better than that of the slaves, which you'll find at the bottom of the pyramid. Yeah? Okay, that's the pyramid in short, but we're going to go a little bit in detail and see what is special about it, right? So we know that the pharaoh is on top, and to show his might, to show his power, he's got all kinds of symbols. Yeah? For example, the cobra. Let's see if I can change this to a marker. Yeah, the cobra, for example. The crook. Yeah? Or a shepherd's stick. A shepherd's stick is een herderstaf. And this is a power symbol. This means I am in charge, I'm the pharaoh. But who else has this? Santa Claus, Sinterklaas has got one like of this. Yeah, you see how this symbol is still a symbol today. Yeah, and then we've got the flail or the whip and zweep. Yeah, it shows that the pharaoh could be both a very good father on the one hand, because he's taking care of his sheep. Yeah, and on the other hand, he can be very strict. Yeah. If you do something to me, I'll be very strict. I will punish you. That's what the pharaoh says. Okay? So those are the symbols of the pharaoh. Also, this beard is quite funny. I might have already told you about this. Like, you see Tutmosis with this beard. It's not a real beard. You normally see a rope here going on the face if you look at statues, and then it's a fake beard. And it also shows that he's powerful. It's a power symbol. You can see the pharaoh here performing a ceremony. Yeah, it's the same thing here. Yeah. Okay. Next, this is a pharaoh performing some rituals in the temple. At the temple, yeah. He was very powerful, but he had a lot of rights. He could do a lot of stuff, all the things he wanted, actually. But there was a lot of things he had to do. Yeah? So he had a lot of duties. Duty and plicht. Yeah? It was his duty for the flood to happen. Yeah? The flood, the overstroming. So he had to talk with the gods. He had to make sure that everything was okay in Egypt. Yeah? If things went wrong, it was his fault. Yeah. So what often happened is that the pharaoh got killed. They would murder him. Yeah? Who in the pyramid would murder the pharaoh? Do you think the slaves would murder him? Do you think the farmers would murder him? Or maybe the generals? Or the priests? Yeah, of course it's the generals and the priests that would murder him. Yeah, because maybe they thought they could take his place. Of course. Yeah. I can do better. Yeah. Right. Okay. So, in the book, so the pharaoh is king and living god. He's the son of Ra. He has all the power. This is quite important. He's very rich. During ceremonies, he's wearing the symbols of power. Make sure that you know some of these symbols. Right. Okay. So this was the palace on the left. That's where the pharaoh lived. So he had a very good life. He had slaves. There were lots of parties going on. Yeah. Rich kids could also go to school. Yeah, only rich kids. The other people wouldn't go to school. Do you think it was strict, the school? Do you think they would punish or? Yeah, I think it's very strict, because look at this guy here. Yeah. He also has a whip, a zweep. Yeah. So I think if they're not paying attention, they would get from the whip. Yes. Of course, rich girls, they've got rich clothing. They got all these kinds of expensive stuffs. Look at this. Do you know what this is? When they sleep, they put their head on this. Yeah, must have been awful. because they thought it was good for the neck. It would give you yourself a beautiful long neck, which was good for rich girls, of course. So they would sleep on this. This is a mirror. They already had mirrors and so on. Good. The elite, the privileged. Yes. So there was a vizier. He's kind of prime minister. You already know this. There were the governors, senior officials. Senior betekent ouder en officials bedienden. Dat betekent eigenlijk gewoon de belangrijkste bedienden. Senior. Het woordje senior in het Engels betekent altijd dat je een heel speciale functie hebt. Right. Down the data and write the texts. Then we've got the army officers, generals and so on, and the high priest, of course. Yes? The poor people, the farmers. You would have both farmers on the fields, of course, and you have poor people in the cities, because cities were beginning to emerge everywhere, and this is what their life looked like. They would mainly live outside. They wouldn't live in their houses because they were actually too tiny. They weren't very comfortable. So it was beautiful weather all the time, so people would live outside. Kids would mostly be naked. They weren't wearing anything. And what is she doing here? What's this girl doing? She's baking bread, of course. This is a grinding stone. Grinding a maalsteen. And do you see this? Oh, what did I do? Okay. Yeah. Did I turn back? I don't know what I did. But it comes, the picture returns, it's no problem. So therefore 95% of the populations. There's soldiers, low officials, craftsmen, traders, farmers. Do you understand all these words? So low officials, lage bedienden. Craftsmen, ambachtslui. Dus craft is met je hand werken. Mindcraft, bijvoorbeeld. Traders, handelaars, farmers, boeren. They were poor and had to work really hard, of course. Sad. This is the way they would transport things. This is a kind of vase. And you see the point here? You see this? Isn't that annoying? If you put it on the ground, it kind of falls over. If you have a vase, it's flat. The bottom is flat. Understand? So if you have a vase, een vaas, the bodem is plat. Now, because there weren't any roads yet in Egypt, it was sand all over. So if you wanted to put your vase on the ground, you would do like this. And you would put it in the ground. So this was actually pretty handy. And it was handy for another thing. If you would travel by ship, they would like build a rack, and then they would put it in there. So that was pretty handy, right? Good. This is where I think the senior official lives. This is his house. Maybe it's even a vizier that works there. And then he's over here in this little tent. And of course the people are working. People are working on the field. This is, remember this? Shadoof. It's a funny word. I think it's a funny word. Right? So that's how the system works. People from places, lower places in the pyramid were working for people in higher places in the pyramid. Yes? I need to check this quickly. Alright, let's go to the next slide for a second. This doesn't take very long, this lesson, so I think there's only a few more slides. We need to talk about the slaves, of course. How did you become slave? What had to happen in your life before you became a slave? Well, you could have been a prisoner of war. So if your side lose, if you attacked Egypt, for example, and you lose, this means that they would turn you into a slave. They would sell you on the slave market, just like something, so like a thing. They would put a price on your head, and someone had to pay it. Or maybe their parents were also slaves. Maybe you were born as a kid in a slave family. That was pretty sad, because this would make you a slave also. And there's another way that you could become slave, and that's when you murder someone, for example. There were no prisons in ancient times. So people were very practical. If you were condemned to death, they would find a job for you to do for the rest of your life. You would go to the mines, for example, the mines, the Menen silver mines. They were terrible places. People wouldn't mostly last for more than 3 years. Yeah? So 3 years and you would die, because you would die of fatigue. Fatigue is when you're very, when you're worn out, when you're very, very tired and so on, and you're hungry and your body isn't okay anymore, and then you would die. Yeah? So that's pretty bad. So Egyptians were not the only ones to do this. So let's not blame the Egyptians. The Romans did it too, and the Greek did it too. Actually, the ancient times, they were a slave society. Yeah, good. So they had no rights at all, and they were the instruments of their master. That's also something that is quite important. You can use this place to practice the social pyramid. Yeah. So if you want to, you can make the drawing again. Put 2 lines, and then you put in all the parts of the social pyramid. Normally you had to know this by heart. If it's not a corona time, dan moest je het kennen van buiten. But now, of course, you don't have to know this by heart, because you can always use the book when you do a test, right? I think that's the end of the lesson. There was a speaking challenge that we would do in class. I wouldn't like to be because they had to, because they didn't have. Yeah. What would you like to be in the social pyramid? Would you like to be the pharaoh? I wouldn't want to be a slave. No, that would be terrible. But even being a farmer, that would be bad too. But you think about it, being the pharaoh is not the nicest spot to be the pharaoh either. Yeah? Because he had a lot of responsibilities and he could get murdered, right? Okay.